Please welcome Pascal Mafait with Booking.com and TR Newcomb with Riskified.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to Ascend. We're so excited to have all of you. I'm TR Newcomb. I lead the strategy team at Riskified, and I have the tremendous privilege today of speaking with Pascal Mafait, who, among other things, leads all the fraud-fighting initiatives for Booking.com, a company, of course, which needs no introduction. They're one of the largest e-commerce companies in the world. So, Pascal, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So before we get started, we're going to talk about the evolution of fraud-fighting strategies over time. I found out a fascinating little tidbit about your life yesterday. So Pascal, let me get this right. Before joining Booking many years ago, you and your wife moved to Kruger National Park in South Africa, lived in the bush by yourselves, with snakes, hyenas, lions, and everything else, and you did it on your own. I think that's the ultimate test of risk management. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's correct. So basically, I've worked in financial industry in risk management for some time, and then we decided to do something completely different. So we thought, let's move to the bush. Very soon realized that was all about risk management as well, with everything walking around there. So yeah, that's correct. We've had a great time. 3 years, Kruger National Park, and yeah, that was an amazing experience.
That's awesome. And how many years have you been at Booking now?
I think it's about 8.5 now. 8.5. Yeah, time flies.
That's awesome. All right, so you've seen a ton.
Yeah.
You've gone through this incredible journey. You've made your team so much more effective. You've been a wonderful partner to Riskified. We've loved working with you. And I know you've learned a ton. And a lot of what you've learned has to do with organizational design.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about what that journey's been, and what are the lessons we can share?
Yeah. So I think for context, we've gone through quite an amount of growth as a company, as Booking.com. So, and through that journey, we've learned quite a lot, but we've also been challenged quite a lot, obviously. A lot of attacks, a lot of different new trends that were sort of thrown at us. And we had to respond to these things quite rapidly. And we've always been doing that in a certain way, where we had an organizational design with engineers, machine learning, and analytics working together. Which worked for us for quite some time, but we got to a stage at some point where we noticed that roles and responsibilities weren't always very clear. We weren't always able to respond super fast to attacks, for example, and not just within fraud, but within our entire security and fraud organization. So we've grown from a team of 40 to a team of 150, and then even further, to the point that was not sustainable. So we organized a transformation program, so to say, where we asked a lot of input from a lot of different team members. So we did a bit of a bottom-up approach, and we came up with this transformation program based on a capability architecture design, which basically means that we identify different capabilities in the organization that you need to manage, that you need to risk manage, basically. And so what we've done throughout that journey is we have identified these different capabilities, including our fraud capabilities. So the supplier fraud side was like a fraud capability. Our payments fraud side was a capability. And we implemented a capability-led structure. And basically what that means is you appoint CEOs of these capabilities, and you build organizations under them that are more autonomous. So you group product management with engineering, machine learning, analytics, and operations, and they start to work together, and they report up to the same person, which is the capability area lead, the CEO of that capability. So that's a change that we've made about 4 years back, I think, and what that did is it allowed us to respond faster to things. It allowed us also to reset some of the objectives and metrics that we had. So now, instead of having multiple objectives for the different teams, we were more conscious about setting these targets and these objectives that all the teams together could work on, and they could actually work towards those results. And yeah, we've seen good results based on that.
That's great. And one of the things you were telling me yesterday is that when something hits, it used to be the case that somebody would flag a problem, send it up the food chain, and then the solution would trickle down somewhere else inside the organization, and that doesn't happen anymore. You've now got everybody aligned on who does what, and as a result, you can respond much faster.
So even in that previous situation, there was obviously collaboration, but what we've seen now is that that's faster indeed. And decision making is faster as well, because you don't need to go up and escalate these decisions if difficult decisions need to be made to different managers that then need to talk to each other, and if they can't get to an agreement to go even further, you've got your CEO in charge of that capability, and that person makes the decision if possible, if it doesn't touch other areas of the organization.
Got it. That's great. So can you give us some concrete examples of kind of how that new structure has directly impacted a KPI?
Yeah, there's multiple examples there, but I think one of the things that we've seen on the supplier fraud side, for example, is we've seen quite a large attack with fake listings coming on board, and that required quite a lot of collaboration also with the product teams in the business. And in this particular case, we needed to move quite quickly in sort of switching off some of the onboarding programs. But all the insights that were coming from the analytics team were actually feeding directly into the engineering team that was working with the product team to make these changes. And that's just an example where normally that conversation would have taken much longer. But now, because they were actually going after the same metric, they were seeing that metric deteriorating, and therefore the decision to turn something off and to work with the product team in the business was much faster.
Interesting. So we've got a lot of the world's largest merchants in the audience. They've got a ton of resources, but even they may be thinking, hey, I don't have Booking.com resources, or at least some of them may be thinking that. Can you help share what are the lessons that are applicable to companies of any size, regardless of how many resources they have, to try to replicate something along the lines of what you did?
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation, right? And everyone in any fraud team has bumped into that challenge of resources, right? I think we always all want more resources, and I think as Booking, we've been quite privileged to be able to have more resources in order to get our things done. But there's a couple of lessons, I think, from what we've done that are applicable to anyone. Even if you have a fraud team of 1 or 2 individuals, you could apply that as well. And that one of them is that collaboration is key. So, we sort of stimulated some of that collaboration through org design, but if you don't have that, you still have the ability to build strong relationships with your peers, right? To create that bond, to create that collaboration. So that's one piece. The other piece is being very conscious on the metrics and the KPIs that you set, and make sure that that's not just clear for you and your little team of 3, but that KPI aligns with the people that you're working with. So if you don't have the luxury of having your own product team or your own machine learning capabilities, some people in the organization might be working on some of these stories that you've suggested. Go and talk to them and align on these metrics as well. Explain what you're after. Try and understand what they're after in terms of their success metrics, and make sure that you find common ground.
Yeah. So the lesson is really that fighting fraud is a cross-disciplinary exercise. No matter how you want to spin it, you got to enlist teammates, and it takes a village. So that's great.
Yeah.
You've also had the privilege of launching a lot of products, perhaps as many as anybody I've certainly met. Tell me, what have you learned about preemptively anticipating fraud problems, given that you've launched so many products over time? Like, what can we learn for everybody in the room when they launch their next product? What should they be thinking about?
Yeah, I think the luxury of having a lot of product launches is that you're seeing a lot of things going wrong. So learning from these mistakes, I guess, is crucial. But on a more maybe serious note, I think one of the things that we've learned as well is that risk management as a sort of foundational piece is super important there. Whereas in the past, we've seen products go to market without us in the fraud team knowing. So we did not have dedicated monitoring on these cases. They saw great adoption of these products, but the majority of that was fraud. So we were not part of that conversation. We were not at the table when the products were being discussed, created, and launched. that has become much, much better throughout the years. We've really gone through this maturity phase as an organization as a whole, to the point that we now have some structures in place that we are leveraging. So I think the best example is we have a risk assessment process for new product development, which is something that we stimulate all the product teams and product managers across the entire organization to go through. So the moment that they have a product, they need to pitch that, and we need to understand what type of product is that, and different subject matter expertise are being pulled in to give their opinion about that product. So that's not necessarily like a fraud thing, it's more like a risk and control structure that we are leveraging. And we are, as fraud, we are being pulled in as one of the subject matter expertise to look at that initiative and say, looks good for the customer, but also good for the fraudster because no friction or whatever. And that's how we go about that. So it's, again, there's collaboration there, but it is making sure that you understand that end-to-end product and where those vulnerabilities are, and then have a conversation in terms of what you want to do. And then I think, like, as a fraud team, we always want more controls because you don't want that fraud to happen. So it's an iterative sort of process as well, a bit of back and forth. And you might have 20 recommendations and maybe 8 get adopted, but then at least you make a conscious choice as an organization.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this after we spoke yesterday. You're talking about the importance of scenario planning, always anticipating what could potentially go wrong.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting because I got 2 little daughters, and I'm already terrified of the prospect that they're going to get behind the wheel one day and have to get their driver's license. And I'm going to have to teach them how to be safe. And it's all about, anticipating what happens if that giant 18-wheeler suddenly swerves in front of you. What happens if that motorcycle behind you, speeds up in front of your car, and anticipating every possible scenario. And it seems like that's just good housekeeping, regardless of what you're trying to do if you're preventing adverse outcomes.
And practice. I think maybe you should send them to South Africa, to the bush and drive there. They'll learn
no,
fast.
Thank you. Yeah, they will.
Fast.
No, thank you. Yeah. No, thank you. So we live in interesting times. There's always uncertainty. You've talked about some of the trade-offs that you need to make as you think through a whole host of different business decisions, whether it's launching a new product or anything else that you're looking to achieve.
Yeah.
You constantly need to think through the balance between profitability and fraud prevention. They're 2 very competing objectives. Tell us how to think through those trade-offs.
Yeah. That's an interesting one, and that's one that I think all of us in the room, are faced with every single day, right? Making these trade-offs. How much do you accept in terms of transactions? How much do you reject? How fast can you go as an organization? That's an important element to take into account. And I think it comes back to the scenario planning again as well. So you have that conversation up front. And so the way we've done it within Booking is we set risk appetite, risk tolerance, and we do that formally. So that risk appetite is not owned by me or my teams in fraud, but that's actually a business-owned metric, a business-owned number that we're going after. And so when you have that up front and you agree on that, that's sort of the dot on the horizon that you can use to steer. Can I go faster? Can I go slower? So that works really well. We have a governance structure around that, and for the different types of fraud that we have, we set that risk appetite, and it's very clear for everyone. And that metric we measure on a day-to-day basis. Is one of the dashboards that I open on a daily basis as well to see, hey, how are we doing? And based on that, you can start to adapt and adjust as well. So that balance, is always important. But if you have visibility and the agreement between the fraud and the risk team and the business in terms of what are we all comfortable with, it makes it a bit easier, especially when the shit hits the fan.
Okay. That makes sense. So you have an incredible perch into the e-commerce industry. I mean, what an incredible platform to be associated with. You must see so many trends, so many interesting fraud vectors. You're doing business in every non-sanctioned country in the world, huge volumes of GMV. Tell us, what are the fraud trends that you anticipate over the next couple of years? Yeah. And what is Booking.com doing to preemptively anticipate those trends?
Yeah. I don't think that the trends that we are seeing are very, very different from what others in the audience might see. And I think Danielle did her presentation just now, and she showed some of the challenges that we are faced with also from a cyber perspective. And I think that's maybe the first one to call out, is that intersection between cybercrime and fraud is getting more apparent every day, basically. And I think that's one of the things that we need to keep track of. And as fraud and risk teams, we need to be aware of that. So if you haven't had a chance to build strong relationships with your CISO, with your security and cyber organization, when you get back to the office on Friday or Monday, go and have coffee with them, because that's going to be crucial in the coming period. So I guess that's one of the things. It also allows attackers to, at large scale, attack us even more and easily. So being ready for that is important. So some of the things that we are seeing as a result of that, obviously, are ATO. On our side, we see large-scale attacks from a reservation perspective hitting our platform. And what we're seeing, if you're a marketplace, they also look for the weakest link in that entire ecosystem, right? So if you up your game and you up your controls, they'll try and go after sort of the supplier side of your business, or third parties. In that ecosystem are the ones that are going to be attacked. So you might have done everything that you can from your perspective, but there might be another element in that ecosystem that is more vulnerable, and through that, they'll be able to get to you. So these are the types of things that we're seeing. I think that's from a fraud perspective, but obviously when we talk about trends, I would also want to talk about opportunities. I know we talked about like buzzword bingo. Obviously, Gen AI is an important element, and we cannot not mention it, I think, here. On the fraud side, what we are seeing is that's posing challenges for us. So you've got Worm GPT, Fraud GPT, and it's much easier and much more accessible for fraudsters to go after us and attack us, right? You don't have to code or have to be able to code. You can actually get some of these prompts from these tools. But on the flip side of that, it allows us also to become smarter and more effective as an organization. So the way we are looking at it as well is some of the more manual operation works that we are doing, and how can we leverage Gen AI to become more effective. So we've always focused on what can we automate, what are the things that we are doing repetitively, and try and get as much of that out of the process. We'll continue to do that. But I think Gen AI is going to help us to get there faster. On the payment side, on the chargeback defense side, there's opportunities there, but also from a content perspective. So I look after trust and safety and also the supplier fraud side. And so we deal a lot with content and reviewing content to try and identify threats that are there as well. And so we're looking at these things as well at Booking.com to strengthen our sort of governance around Gen AI so that we can ship these products faster and use that.
That's amazing. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I would like to say that I just learned recently, in addition to you living in Kruger National Park, that you had spun up this team of CEOs internally, of fraud CEOs. So from here forward, I'm going to refer to you as the Booking.com fraud czar. And no, in all seriousness, I want to say thank you so much for your partnership. You guys have been wonderful to work with. Pascal's team did a podcast recently on fraudology, speaking through a lot of these lessons in a lot more detail. I highly recommend it. It's very educational. Pascal Mafait, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.